I'm already getting goosebumps as I stand here in this historic and majestic building. For those of you who are new, who do not know about it, or those who are watching this online, this building was constructed between 13th to 15th century. And the majestic tower that you see outside was struck by lightning twice, but thankfully was restored. And now, as you can see, it stands in the middle of the city, stunning and attracting many tourists. Places and monuments are important to us, to our sense of history, to our sense of belongingness. They remind us of the good things or the bad things that have happened there. We remember them and we remember those events that took place there. Today, I want to talk to you about a place where an event took place. And these three characters, Boaz, Naomi, and Ruth, they met together. Their stories converged at a place. But before that, I would like to explore with you these three characters and see if they have anything to teach us today. May I suggest that all three main characters of this passage that has been read to us face different questions. And as they try to answer these questions, they show their trust in God. Once we have seen these questions and taken some application for our lives, I will return to the point of places. Before we go further, yet another note of caution. This is one of very difficult passages to understand if we do not have any idea of historical context in which this plays out. We need to keep two things in our minds. Number one, the law of Moses commanded that if a man died childless, his brother should marry the widow and continue the family line. This was called levirate marriage. The second was that the law also commanded that if anyone becomes poor and has to sell his land, the closest relative needs to buy it and redeem the land. He was known as Goel, or family redeemer. Now we need to keep these two things in mind because all these three characters function within the confines of this social context. So now, since we have done that, let us look at three characters. The first character is Naomi. Any Indian like me reading this passage would immediately appreciate Naomi for taking a very important step in planning an arranged marriage. And especially would appreciate Naomi's role as a wedding planner, as someone who had taken the first step, who has taken the responsibility of uniting Boaz and Ruth. Naomi in this passage acts as Ruth's guardian. She calls Ruth in verse 1, my daughter. Not my daughter-in-law, but my daughter. Now, if you are in the Eastern context, these two are quite different things. She treats her as her daughter and even acts like her father, because in the Eastern context, again, it's the duty of the father to initiate a marriage proposal. She knows that Ruth has left her everything, her country, her people, for Naomi to be with her and to serve her. And now, as they say, the ball is in her court to return the favor. In initiating this proposal, Naomi is indeed like an Eastern mother from an Eastern context, or more like an Indian mother who takes exceptional interest in the love life or wedding of her daughter. She thinks that Boaz is the right person to marry Ruth, and she has her own logic to support that. Firstly, she knows because Boaz has a good social standing. Now again, in an Eastern context, marrying a man of a higher or good social standing is very important because the whole culture functions within the concepts of shame and honor. So if you marry a man who has a high social standing, you bring honor to yourself and to your entire family. And so she knows that Boaz has a high social standing. She also knows that Boaz is a rich man. And if Naomi marries Ruth, Ruth's financial struggles will be solved. Particularly now that the harvest season has ended, there will be no more work for Ruth. So it may be a good idea to get her hitched to Boaz. So then Ruth doesn't have to worry anymore about her future financial struggles, about being fed and taken care of. She also knows that Boaz is from the same clan as her husband. Now again, in an Eastern context, this is very important even today in many cultures. This is an important criterion for marriage. In addition to all this, Naomi knows that Boaz is interested in Ruth. Ruth has worked in Boaz's field for close to 3 months. And she has heard from Ruth that there is a very interesting relationship developing between Ruth and Boaz. She has seen that there is a warm relationship between the two. She knows that Boaz treats Ruth differently, or specially. But she also knows that tonight, with the harvest festival, this dating period will be over. And as it comes to end, the only thing we need to do is to let this dating period result into the marriage of the two. So Boaz is rich, he's famous, he's from the same clan, and he's interested in Ruth. What else do you want? It's a perfect match. Or at least that's how many cultures around the world who believe in arranged marriage look in a potential candidate. Moreover, in Eastern cultures or in ancient Eastern culture, widows were often at the mercy of the dead man's family. And in exceptional cases like this one, like Ruth's case, their chances of remarriage were quite bleak. So Boaz is the best match, and this is the best time to act. Strike the iron when it is hot, as they say. Let me pause here and see if I have already convinced you about the virtues of arranged marriage. You may wonder, what is this man who has adorned Indian dress, speaking in Indian accent? Is he trying to convince us about arranged marriage? Not really. Because this passage is more than convincing you about the benefits of arranged marriage. This is because Naomi is different than many typical Eastern or Indian parents. Yes, she has financial security on her mind, but she's not the one who has forced this relationship to develop. Her proposal to Naomi follows only what she has heard from Ruth. Her proposal to Ruth and Boaz follows only from what she has seen blossom between the two. She, in fact, here discerns this opportunity that circumstances, or should I rather say God, has offered her. And in that sense, she is not sending Ruth to trap this eligible bachelor. Rather, she is calling Ruth and Boaz to discern with her what God is doing, to be serious about it. But she can't, as a woman in this culture, she can't tell this directly to a man. She has to find an innovative way to do this. And this is why Naomi finds this very creative and very risky plan. Very interesting that now Naomi's discernment comes in the middle of bitterness that she's experiencing. In chapter 1 and verse 20, she says that God has made her life bitter. The question for her is this then: can she trust that God is the one who is bringing these circumstances in her favor, considering the fact that she has been through times of bitter experiences? Indeed, she does. The baggage of history doesn't stop her from perceiving this opportunity that God has sent her way. Her plan is a response to the recognition that God has shown favor and will be the ultimate redeemer of the two childless widows. Let's move to the second character, Ruth. According to Jewish tradition, Ruth was a princess of Moab, a member of a royal family. But after marrying a Jew, her fortunes have turned. By now, she has lost her status as a royal member, or member of a royal family. And on top of that, she has lost her husband, for whom she left everything. She left her people, she left her country, she left her God. Now she has begun to worship a new God, has adopted a new culture, and has immigrated to a new country. And in this new country, now a former member is gleaning in the local fields along with other women to provide livelihood for herself and for her old mother-in-law. And as if this is not enough, Naomi asks her to do something unimaginable. She is asked to wash and perfume herself, put on her best clothes, and go to visit a man who has just celebrated, eaten and drunk to his fill, and to meet her in the middle of the night. And as strange as it is, she is to uncover this man's feet, and when he wakes up, she is to ask him the corner of his garment to cover him. Again, this is very difficult if we do not understand the context or the social situation that Naomi and Boaz and Ruth are placed in. The uncovering of feet was actually to wake up this man, to wake up Boaz. Because again, women would not talk directly to men, and so they will have to be creative. And one of the creative ways to do it is to leave his feet uncovered so he wakes up in the middle of the night. And the request to spread the corner of his garment was a proposal for marriage. Take care of me, or literally, take me under your wings. But how can a woman propose marriage to a man? That would be against the culture of the time. In many cultures, even today, men find it offensive if a woman proposes them a marriage. And in those cultures, women would rather leave it unexpressed than confess the feeling for a man. And then there are other risks. What if Boaz makes use of the opportunity and asks her for sexual favors? What if Boaz gets upset and he says he withdraws all his favors from this widow and he does not give her even work anymore? What if the people in the village come to know what was Ruth doing? Will it not bring shame to both Naomi and Ruth? Even if this were to work out, Ruth as a Moabite, would she go and be part of that culture which has a strange custom where you are supposed to marry your dead husband's close relative? And a relative who is surprisingly older, because according to Jewish customs, Ruth was 40 years old when Boaz was 80 years old, and that is when this incident is happening. And yet, she goes through all of this. This whole episode is actually a test of the commitment Ruth has made in chapter 1, verse 16, when she said to Naomi, "Your people will be my people and your God will be my God." The question is this for Ruth. In these challenging times, will she stand true to her commitment to God's people and to God? And she does, because Ruth follows the advice of Naomi without a hint of rebellion. She trusts even Boaz, perhaps because she has worked with Boaz in his field for the last 3 months, and she knows that Boaz is a man you can trust. But above all, she trusts God. She has heard about God from Naomi. She has seen God at work through Boaz. She has heard about the laws of God. And so she reasons, and this is very important. If this God, who commands his people not to glean from the corners of their fields or gather fallen fruit, but to leave them for the needy and the poor, will this God not care for me? Will this God not provide for me? Her willingness to go to threshing floor that night reveals her trust in God, under whose wings she has come to take refuge even before asking Boaz to take her under his wings. The third character and the final character is Boaz, a man of good standing, a man who is rich and kind too, because we are told in chapter 2, verse 4, that as Boaz comes to the field, he greets his workers. Now, this may be a very usual thing for us, but in Eastern context and even today in many contexts, an employer does not take the initiative of wishing his workers. That would be below his dignity. And yet, he wishes his workers. He's humble, he's kind. Perhaps he's interested in Ruth too. He's attracted to Ruth. He says that Ruth is a woman of noble character, a woman of virtue. And yet, for some reason, he's reluctant to take the first step towards Ruth. However, when Ruth boldly proposes him for marriage, Boaz quickly recalls that, wait, there is one more family redeemer who is closer to your family than I am. Perhaps he already had thoughts in his mind of marrying Ruth. Yet, he knows the law and he respects the law. His test, his question is this: Since now Ruth has come to propose me for marriage, should I try to secure Ruth right now by any means? Or should I wait and marry Ruth according to God's law, according to God's stipulations, and according to God's way? In other words, a right means as important as ends. A means as important as ends. Boaz allows the first eligible relative to redeem Naomi and Ruth, and in this, he chooses to remain open to the possibility of losing Ruth. And in that, he trusts God. He waits, and he becomes an example of trusting God. Now we have looked at all three characters. It's time to ask ourselves, what do we learn from this? This is where I want to return to my point about places where I began. This entire story takes place on a threshing floor. Naomi is, of course, not part of this threshing floor. But in crafting, in creating this whole plot, she is also somehow part of the scene at the threshing floor. In ancient cultures, threshing floors was a place of godlessness. It was a center of harvest festival, the celebration of material prosperity, often accompanied by debauchery and sexual immorality. In the Bible, however, God makes threshing floor a place where God would encounter his people, where God would meet his people and help them understand what his plans for them are as individually and for the community only if they would trust him. Threshing floor is a place of pain because this is where grain goes through tremendous amount of pressure to be separated from impurities and from husk. All three characters of our story are in some ways going through their own time at the threshing floor, going through pain and struggles. The questions reveal their anxiety. For Naomi, the question is, can she trust God to begin something new when life is so bitter? For Ruth, the question is, can she trust God even when she is part of a community with strange customs? For Boaz, the question is, can he trust not just in God's provision, but also in following the means to secure those, following right means in securing those provisions. Threshing floor is not only a place of pain, but it is a place of testing and questions, and yet a place of trust. It calls you to trust God during this difficult process of cleansing. It's a place of hope, where even though you are undergoing tremendous amount of pressure, you discover your true potential, just as the grain discovers its true nature, its usefulness, and its consumability. Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz are all at the threshing floor with their own questions, but they show trust in God and ultimately come away with more than they had imagined or asked for. Maybe you are in Naomi's place today. You have just been through time of tremendous pain and pressure and loss. You feel like God has made your life bitter. Yet, the Naomi of our narrative calls you today to keep your eyes open, to keep your heart open, and discern the bigger picture, the bigger story, the story of God, and recognize that His hand is in your life. Perhaps you are in the place of Ruth. You have just come to know about a new God, and you are still exploring this new faith. You have experienced God's goodness. You know that He is good. He loves poor. He takes care of stranger, and yet you are struggling to surrender your life to Him. If that is your condition, Ruth calls you not to turn back from your commitment made to God, but to trust God even when His ways seem strange and demanding. Or perhaps you are in the place of Boaz. You have already seen the providing hand of God in your life. Perhaps you are tempted to quickly secure what God has for you, because losing that thing or that person brings in a lot of fear and insecurity in your life. Boaz calls you to trust God, not just in trusting His provisions, but trusting His ways in securing that provision. As I wind up, may I request you not to give up. If you are standing at the threshing floor of your life, not to give up, but trust in God and let Him hold your hand and lead you successfully, show you your potential as you walk with Him through this experience of being on the threshing floor. God bless you. Amen.